So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto and Kaguya Get Married? So let's start the series. This wasn't all that hard. Who told him being Hokage could be a troublesome work? It had been a simple life up to this point, and it could improve. The flavor of espresso, an open window that occupied the room with a breeze of the town. Unsure of the smell, however he realized it loosened up him, it was home. And still, at the end of the day, a crawling cool air ran up his spine and made him shudder. Naruto had been busy for some time now, so maybe it was from remaining similarly situated for a length measure of time. Pretty much nothing remained to be careful about here, in his home, and in the Hokage's office. To go much further, he was the Hokage, a title that said a lot of the strength of the individual. After every one of the voices of reason, there was as yet a flash of uncertainty that addressed him. There was no strong thinking to his anxiety, he could put it on the horrible that grieved him the previous evening. Accordingly, he zeroed in on the report before him. Naruto's eyes filtered the printed words on the paper. He had previously perused it 2 times. He endorsed in his name and put the record to the side toward the edge of the hardwood work area. It was different being situated on this side, the opposite end was more natural. Naruto stood up from the seat to see the town he had committed to safeguard. Indeed, even as he gone about his responsibilities, that feeling had never vanished, and it filled in force. A fear dozed and it watched. He followed each shadow, each wrinkle and break that he could find in the structures. The primary hour. The entryway shut behind him. The thump of his heart eased back, and he needed such a great amount to turn his look toward it, yet he halted. He wasn't prepared, for anything that it was. A voice called his title. Another sluggish, anguishing, chill crawled up his spine. Naruto realized that voice, he would know it any place. It was new to him, he wouldn't forget at any point in the near future. Naruto gazed into according to a dead man. An individual who had passed on the previous evening. Niji Hyuga. Somebody who had given his life to save him from a spot he ought to have never been in any case. The previous evening? No, that had neither rhyme nor reason. He was fit as a fiddle, before him. This exaggeration of Niji stood straighter, and woofed out words. I might want to report a mission fruitful Master Hokage. Naruto withered. It was as he recalled his voice. What were these considerations? What was happening? Is there something the matter, Ruler Hokage? Excused, Naruto said. Compose a report. I have something to do. Simple words spilled from his mouth. He strolled past the work area, and saved no look at the dead. Words reverberated to Naruto as he did as such. I seek to resemble this Hokage. These contemplations were not his. It was Niji's, that ought to be unthinkable. Did that try and sound like him? He rushed his means and pummeled the entryway behind him. There was a glimmer of red as he found somebody he hadn't taken note. Contents flew high up and he got them easily, nothing destroyed, in wonderful condition. Words were spelled, cheerful birthday Naruto. Naruto froze, he read, and he rehashed it once more. No. Damn it, watch it goodness. He realized that voice that reviled, and saw the long smooth red hair that had a place with his mom. A knot framed, and it was difficult to talk. Naruto. This should be a shock. Kushina Uzumaki whined. He saw his dad that remained behind him, a timid grin. Kushina, you expected to shock a Hokage. Obviously, he's as yet my child. The connection brought him of his days and Naruto gave back the cake. Hang on. I want to accomplish something significant. Ah, truly. Be back soon. He went through the lobbies, a brilliant light encased him. What was happening? His head hurt, so difficult to think. For what reason did he need to hurt somebody so gravely? No part of this ought to occur. Naruto passed the pivots over the entryway that led him outside. He watched it tumble underneath, colliding with the soil. Nobody was near. He took a full breath. It was as he recalled the demeanor of the town, yet none of it felt new. It felt as he was caught in a room, and there was no air left to relax. He focused on the highest point of the structure. A fast leap to the rooftop, and advanced toward the outline of the town. Naruto looked behind to see the busts of the past Hokage. There was him as the sixth, however it felt outsider. He scoured the town, it was as he recalled that each road, building. But it wasn't. No, it must be. He carried on with a whole life here, an entire 20. He got a handle on his head, and each breath was profound and stressed. He knew. Everything set into place, the last, genuine memory came to him. Each and every second felt wrong. No part of this genuine, in spite of the rough, and clashed recollections that were not his. This was a deception, just a manufacture made for him. The bars he clutched broke under the strain of his grasp. The structure shook as he gathered his chakra. The uttermost he could take it, and each wellspring of force he had on his order. This look of the world broke, the town scattered. A short obscurity prior to everything gathered, and rethought into a universe of ice. The virus air wounded at his lungs and a touch carried his look to others next to him. Try not to stress, we got you. Sasuke murmured before he hustled forward. The others, Sakura, Kakashi, Obito all followed close in step. Naruto drifted in the air, and the breezes cried. He saw his hands, grasped them, and shook his head. Inconceivable. A lady mumbled. The voice brought his consideration, and he admired the figure that had a place with Kaguya Otsutsuki. Pale, a third eye, horns, and a long white dress. They were right here, battling against a goddess with practically boundless power. He looked as Sakura, Obito, Kakashi move against her. They evaded, moved with accuracy as Kaguya went after them. Obito's Susanoo caught her inside her grip. Yet, and still, after all that, Sasuke magically transported behind her, but Naruto actually didn't move. Naruto. Finish her. It was phony. Stop it. Stop this poo. He hadn't arrived. This was not genuine. The world went quiet, a flip of a switch and everything cleared away. Everybody vanished. And? A voice inquired. His appendages incapacitated, and he was unable to move, regardless of the amount he willed it as well. There was just a white, clear world. Nothing existed, with the exception of her. Kaguya moved before him, a sideways look. Her clear, white eyes limited. Is that an order? You've won. Haven't you? Naruto yelled. Not exactly, Kaguya turned away. Regardless of how little her grin was, it would constantly be evil. Your partners actually battle, however it would be lifetimes for you until they show up. For what reason would you say you are doing this? How about you kill me and get it over with? Such an inquiry. Ages have passed and it's rarely seen changed. He shouted, and he could at long last move. The imperceptible shackles presently not limited him. There was her alone, nothing else existed, basically nothing else had any significance. He ran toward the goddess, plan on annihilating every last bit of her, to leave just debris. He called his procedure to his hand, and flooded as much power through it. He hit her and nothing remained to be portrayed the happiness as he watched her fly away, caught inside the limits his method. There was a blast, it was enormous to such an extent that he assumed he had kicked the bucket with her. A flicker, and everything vanished. The scene changed, and all he saw was mountains and snow. He saw his breath, it was cold. This wasn't exactly the cold, right? Regardless of what occurred here, whether he be debilitated, dazed, it wouldn't convert into this present reality. Did that provide you with some proportion of fulfillment? His blood ran cold, and he shuddered. Behind him, she bowed on the ground, her dress and hair spread on the virus white under, her modest hand followed the delicate snow. She was without safe, uninterested. Those eyes gazed, they addressed him, he was no danger. Or on the other hand, will you proceed? Let me out of here. Naruto said, an unnatural quiet to his voice. The excess of energy had been utilized. Is that in your temperament? To battle for a useless reason, and to pose futile inquiries? What on God's green earth do you need from me? He was disregarded. For what reason do people grip to their lives? There is no worth. We don't figure the same way as you do. Is that all? How fascinating, to battle for no good reason. Let me go, let me out of this phony world. Return what was once mine, and you will never again endure. She answered. Kaguya gave no consideration to him. In her grips, snow tumbled from her hand and was lost in the breeze. Naruto understood what she alluded as well. What allowed him his power, that everybody living on the planet had, chakra. It was an indispensable quintessence, on the off chance that it were taken, it was sure passing. Never. Regardless of what you do, you'll fall flat. Kaguya didn't say anything, all things being equal, she cleared her hand across the snow. Will your reaction be as similar in 1,000 years' time? That was unimaginable. Wasn't it? It doesn't make any difference assuming that it's two. I stay true to my promise, it won't ever change. For the first time ever, a look of disappointment crossed her elements. Assuming that is the situation, just passing looks for you toward the end. He will constantly challenge her, he could never yield. Then I kick the bucket, then endure. Naruto gazed at the white clear sky of the world. He didn't consider anything, and he fantasized of nothing. He was distant from everyone else now. The virus was as of now not present, the mountain ranges vanished. Just a formation of her will. The world was vacant, he laid on nothing. No, perhaps he was standing. He looked behind him, and there was only the white, clean canvas of this world. A world occupied with space. This was the main day, and he was flying off the handle. Nothing was genuine, all things considered. Could this be ideal? Kaguya had left, a squint and she was no more. In any case, Naruto knew, this was her territory, she would constantly be watching. His contemplations were reasonable his own. However, he wasn't sure. What did she intend to do? How might she respond? He assumed it didn't make any difference. He needed to get away, he needed to persevere. Naruto would have escaped, however, regardless of what much chakra he accumulated to interfere with this deception, nothing worked. That was the main thing he could do, other than stand by on the off chance that his companions could help him. Could it truly be 1,000 years? He shook his head to wipe the contemplations. He set his hands in a seal to assemble chakra, and erased it. It didn't work, so he attempted once more. Also, once more, and once more, and once more, until he could go no more. The main week, he strolled the fields. The grass influenced, however there was no wind unnatural dash, except for the breeze blew and the world continued request. The sky was vacant and dormant when a hint of blue spread into the distance, and mists framed and moved in the air. He continued his comfortable walk, however it was only that, and it wasn't sufficient. The ground underneath him developed, and his means went higher to track down by. He looked toward the precarious, and it went for eternity. He proceeded, and after some time, his legs started to consume. Naruto halted to rest when he could go no more. He sat, and looked as the sun plunged behind the world. The moon showed up above, and he looked at the sparkling bit until it vanished. Regardless of the time he paused, the consume in his legs had never recuperated. Gold light got through the mists, and the time had come to move. He pushed on in his move of the endless mountain. He ate food when he was ravenous, and drank when he was parched. Regardless of the amount he refreshed, the torment in his legs never tracked down alleviation. What was Kaguya arranging? For what reason did she enable him to shape the world spontaneously? He didn't figure out it. A goddess looked after him, and it wasn't for the decency of her heart. There was no heavenly security. It was a remarkable organization, and a peaceful one. The aggravation that he felt, it wasn't genuine, yet the way his ligaments consumed, it was as just as he recollected. He became weary of this perpetual ascension, and the mountain retreated until it was level. The ground shuddered, fell, and was gulped by brilliant sands. All he saw were rises, and the sand blew away at the tips. He meandered the desert for quite a long time. He fell, his mouth dry and dried. Lips broke and dying. He crept through the coarse sand, until he supernaturally ran over a desert garden. He dunked his head in for water, before he fell inside and dropped to the base. Naruto calmly inhaled, and he neglected to suffocate. There was simply not a lot to do. He didn't need to drink, he didn't need to eat. He raced to occupy from his concern. He wished to be depleted, so became it. The weighty appendages, the shortcoming, and how the breaths were generally shallow and you couldn't any more air. Water spilled into his lungs, fatigue neglected, and he had to the surface. The primary month. What on earth is there to do? He shouted. There was reverberation. It's all phony. His voice sounded in the gorges of the wilderness. He should go 1,000 years without seeing someone else. When did he last express a word? Very nearly a month had passed, hadn't it? There was sweat in his forehead from the intensity and stickiness of the wilderness. I've been meandering for so damn lengthy in this vacant dream, there's nothing for me here. Then, at that point, he went to see Kaguya. She remained on ice. Clear, clean, and deep. Truth be told, there was nothing anyplace, just ice underneath their feet. Make what? He answered. There was no utilization battling her, and nothing he could do could at any point hurt her. Anything you want. Her arm reached out to him, palm level against the sky. The stars above shimmered, before colors erupted to life. Lights overhead that moved each snapshot of each and every variety. He had caught wind of this peculiarity, yet he had never seen it. For what reason did you empower me to do this? However, another useless one. She answered, and her eyes restricted. Debilitating as of now. A day, or a year implies practically nothing to me, however it has not even started. Quiet down. He made her vanish, yet she showed up to his right side. On the off chance that you could do without something like this, make your optimal world. It won't ever be. He shut his eyes, yet they were eyes wide shut. I hold the genuine domain here, or is this your concept of flawlessness? No, obviously not. I have no great explanation as well, this is only all phony. They're nothing by any means. We share similar convictions. A long way from it. Naruto answered. Is there? Kaguya shifted her head. What sort of inquiry is that? Kaguya, the chilly goddess. It was a fitting name for somebody with an absence of essential human comprehension. What in blazes happened to her? Or then again, would she say she was screwing with him? He didn't have the foggiest idea, however she was like this when he had battled in reality. What are you? He asked, yet she was at that point gone. He strolled into the destruction of the structure. The wood was dark and spoiled, greenery filled in obscurity corners of the room. Grass developed inside and plants in blossom where the sun contacted them. A little reflection got his attention, glass concealed under the front of the fauna. He found a photo placement, however there was nothing when he turned it over. He looked into the debauched room turning into a natural sight. One more look at the photo placement showed a photograph of Group 7. He frowned at Sasuke, while the other kid was none excessively intrigued. The other two were grinning, Kakashi and Sakura. Naruto missed them. The last time he talked was when Kaguya had last moved toward him, just 2 experiences up to this point, almost a month since he was brought here. Naruto scrambled over a fallen wall to arrive at the rooftop above. He saw everything outside, the congested town of the Secret Leaf. Trees outgrew houses, greenery and other fauna developed from town. He peered down underneath to the roads, pools of water, and stream had assumed control over the walkway. A glance at the Hokage landmark actually showed the 5 past Hokage. Great, similarly as he recollected that it. Nothing came to or spoiled the appearance of the 5. This fantasy was excessively brutal. He wouldn't want it for his most exceedingly awful foe. Regardless of how frequently he said it, nothing was genuine. An existence of isolation was unrealistic. He was a month in, and he could never perceive how he could last 1,000 years. Consistently in his childhood, those days needing to fail to remember in his psyche, was managed attempting to track down any kind of solace from the murkiness of forlornness. Regardless of how little or adolescent the endeavors he made to track down it. He was right here, alone. This was only a conjuration of his town. The main sureness, that he could say with complete, outright determination was that Kaguya had her own will. She, in spite of the deceptive method was genuine, her goals, convictions, were all her own. He would have rather not made. He didn't need these powers. Individuals that he hadn't even made couldn't have ever their own will, they would be just mannequins. Of course, what was the utilization of holding on until the 1,000 years passed? He was sure that Kaguya had her palm to his stomach, her all-killing debris bone prepared to kill him the second he was liberated. He could give up, or he could kick the bucket. There was no chance to get out of this. No. Never. He would pick his demise, he won't go discreetly into the evening. This was to oppose all Kaguya accepted, despite how barbaric it could be. He needed to endure the years he was caught, and regardless of whether the exact second he was liberated was passing, it would be a demonstration of insubordination. All he needed to do was get by. The length of the fiberglass bar ran long, it plunged out, past the brink and looked inside the interminable blue. The string was the more fearless one, it pierced on a deeper level, somewhere inside the waters. At the end of the string, what was it called, was a draw with snare joined to it. There was 4 or 5 sections to a casting pole, obviously, the reel brought it back in. The reel would reel in the string. Its name couldn't be string, isn't that so? It needed to something different, more likened to fishing names. Reel, pole, snare, draw, and string. String felt wrong. He chose to zero in on the tip of his casting pole, watching it plunge somewhat. It was enticing to see it twist, the indication of a catch. Obviously, it would mean a fish anticipated toward the end, the fantastic award, everything being equal. I can't help thinking about what sort of fish is here. Is it even conceivable to get lobster or something around here? I can truly go for lobster, I heard it's tasty, I never got to attempt it. Sakura once let me know she went to this extravagant eatery with Ino and they got to attempt lobster, and some other extravagant dish that I don't recall. I simply recollect how she said it was great that I needed to attempt it. I never asked how it tasted, and I never found time to go to that spot. What was it called once more? I went there once, I recall it being costly. So I never got to attempt it. Something broke in the grip of his fingers. He took a full breath of the cool, damp air. The relaxed his hold, however his finger actually felt unbending. He was starving, he contemplated. The pole pulled descending, to such an extent, similar to it would break. He felt the jerks in his grasp from the pole. The stomach yelled, his mouth watered. The mind, in any case, was disheartened. The line stopped, the pole snapped back straight and frozen. Do lobster try and nibble after trap and draws? It is even fit for gnawing something to that effect. As per these considerations, he recalled anglers likewise utilized nets. There was no goddamn net on this boat. How was he in any event, going to get a net? The sea was profound, he didn't actually have any idea how far it went. Something broke in his grasp, it fell against the wooden floor of the boat. Damn it! He yelled. He brought in the line, and after a short time, the draw influenced from the breezes. He gazed long, a craving to see it consumed to debris in his grasp welled inside him. Obviously, that didn't occur, something like this was preposterous. Screw fishing. He hurled the casting pole, twirled around, and flung it off the boat and into the distance. There was a proportion of fulfillment, seeing the bar float, prior to sinking into the sea. This was excessively hard, particularly when he was unable to comply to the standards. He watched the sun. It plunged into the sea, approaching the start of its rest. An undermining thunder. Behind him, in the apparently perpetual sea since he hadn't pondered land swelled, irate mists, a defilement that kept on spreading. That doesn't look great, he stopped. Well, that is self-evident. He traveled through wreck of the little boat. He alone could oversee it. He pulled along the length of the rope, the coarse material went through his hands. The sail and wood reeled forward, influencing toward the quick breezes. The boat inclined to one side, water spilled in, finishing the wood. Naruto put his consideration on the controlling reel. How precisely did these things turn? What were they called? A rudder. Rudders under the boat permitted them to turn without the sails being moved, and considered exact moving. He turned the wheel, and the boat corrected itself, flooding forward. That is the way it worked, how it will constantly work in here. It was such a ton more straightforward in reality, they were simply there. He didn't need to consider it, simply invest a lot into and do. Straightforward, simple. He didn't focus on how long passed, all he zeroed in on was the difficult aches in his vacant stomach. Up to the second the tempest had up to speed. The mists above had surpassed the quiet blue, presently writhing with thunder and light. Downpour tumbled from the sides, pelting him with its enormous drops. The waves developed harsh, crashing and hurling. The boat, a captive to the sea, twisted to the desire of the tempest. Water spilled into the deck and washed away. Downpour flew in from sideways, running into everything. From the short time frame he spent on boats, it was dependably wet. The decks were wet, inside was doused, his clothing was soaked, everything under the sun. He was tired of the waters now, truth be told. Yet, on the grounds that he was tired of it, didn't mean it planned to end. The freezing dash of the sea was ceaseless. The waves were currently precipitous, moving and unending. He hung on the railing for help, his boat went sideways, yet corrected itself before it could suffocate. He rode at the summit of the waves, prior to dropping once more into the water, a lot of like a boat ought to act. His appendages shook, goosebumps littered his tissue, and his fingers grasped the wheel so hard it seemed like it could break. Indeed, even through this, his heart was consistent, quiet, gathered. Up until, there was something he didn't anticipate. A bluff of water that arrived at the skies. No. This wasn't in no standards. Interestingly, in such a drawn-out period of time that he could scarcely recollect, his heart gleamed. The shadow of the wave overwhelmed the light. It twisted, similar to a hand folding over his boat. The water surged vertical, a wall, and his boat punctured its cover. It tore his boat separated, anything unfastened or free, was tossed over the edge. He had close to zero insight into the sea, cool, pungent, and loaded up with life. Screw the sea. The muffled accidents of waves far above. The secrets of the sea around him. It was cold as well, his fingertips shivered disagreeably. He actually felt his weight, established on the wooden deck underneath his feet. The sails of his boat streamed like breeze push it. This wasn't the way things worked. It shouldn't have worked like this, it wasn't close by anyone's standards. Hello, work, damn it, don't defy the guidelines. We should sink. Ships shouldn't swim. As a matter of fact, I'm almost certain it should be truly dull, and I shouldn't realize what direction is up or down. He approached the edge of his boat, and peered down underneath. For hell's sake, how am I talking at present? There was murmur, and his heart halted its thump. When will you put away playthings? Her voice, dissolving, practically vile, amusing. In any case, with that pleasant, enchanting tone, he could never have envisioned how beautiful another voice felt. Naruto gulped a thick irregularity. He went to confront her, the wellspring of the voice. Kaguya went down the 2 or 3 stages. Her hand gently following the rails, her hair limped along her, ringlets streaming above from the weightlessness of water. What? Becoming weary of stalling? Naruto answered. He was practically dubious on the most proficient method to talk. How this dance of words should go with someone else. Abnormal. No, I have no such thing, Kaguya said. She didn't look in that frame of mind by any stretch of the imagination. She gazed inactively at the things that laid around on his boat. Then, he stopped. How about you simply get it over with? You posed a similar inquiry in the no-so-distant past, quite recently. He faltered. A long time, it's been very nearly a year. She saved a look, her white eyes choosing him before she transformed and looked up into the surface. Naruto felt all the battle in him vanish. The unpleasant taste of her presence, everything except, vanished. He was unable to bear to stand any longer, so he sat and rested up against the rails. There was something about the sleekness of her voice that delighted him, how she addressed him, how it sounded. It was practically terribly deadpan, yet, at the same time, loaded up with crude life. It was such a long time ago since he heard another voice. He cried no tears, she was unable to see this in the sea. He detested how time had elapsed. He wished he never followed along, however he had as well. Any other way he wouldn't know how much longer he needed to hang on. This will be generally north of 1 day. He would have rather not it emerged as an inquiry. It will, yet, you definitely know how this will end. He was unable to recollect the subtleties of their last discussion. He longed to hear more, to remind himself he was in good company in this world. I could never do this to someone else, never, it's excessively brutal. This is benevolence, this is torment. Is it? Kaguya shifted her head aside, her white eyes in puzzlement. Could it be said that she was human? At any point might it at some point be neglected? She grinned, in what way? He would have rather not answered. Something nestled into stomach when she kept on talking. Regardless, you have ability to facilitate the excursion. For what reason do you cause yourself struggle? It's not really any, not as much as what the remainder of the world is encountering. He had shut his eyes, paying attention to each word she said. How she would articulate her words, slow, deliberate. It helped through the water, similar to she talked into his ear. Anything brings you happiness, it can proceed, yet not perpetually, not in here. We're simply rehashing the same thing now. She didn't answer. He woke up, and she was no place in sight. It was just him and boat under his feet. The territory he held had gotten back to him. The boat sunk, as did his heart. All he saw was haziness. He didn't realize what direction was up, what direction was down. He had a go at getting plastered once. He was 20 in this world, so his commitment was kept. Ignoring the one time he coincidentally drank a taste, he never had liquor. That rationale close by, he had never become inebriated. It couldn't be recreated by dream drink. Thus, it was a useless undertaking. On another event, he rethought minutes in his young life. Consider the possibility that situations spun out of control, similar to imagine a scenario in which his folks had raised him. He wasn't a member, yet rather, an observer. He watched like a quiet and imperceptible god. Part way, he understood that this individual could not have possibly been him. Envisioning it after a time frame was likewise hard. He frequently unveiled himself with enormous measures of ramen. Each sort of ramen dish he could imagine, he made and ate it. Every last bit of it were basic delights throughout everyday life. As far as possible was his creative mind. In any case, through it all he felt compelled. Restricted by the world he knew on the grounds that he didn't have the foggiest idea how something tasted, or what something looked like. Whether he knew the guardians of an individual, or different individuals from their loved ones. He chose to investigate another road. Naruto watched with decreased breath. Whether directed by impulse, or done deliberately, every development was exact and controlled. A solitary stumble, or some unacceptable decision would end in death. The stakes had never been higher. It was all looking blows, or impeded strokes. A breadth of a kick that went clear, or a punch that was parried. The impasse broke, a punch to the face, disorientated, one more in the ribs. The casualty fought back with a headbutt. There was a delightful thing about the break when it landed. He fell back, a hand gripped his nose, dazed and dying. He didn't see the kick, and he was sent away into the brush. A pass in an ideal string, it existed exclusively to break the tedium. The passing victor in the round, shook his head cleaning the surprise away and surged in after his aggressor. He followed, inconspicuous. It would be not difficult to change the tide, however he was unable to meddle in things previously foreordained. Goosebumps crept over his skin, and a shudder of joy. This was exactly the way that he envisioned it. How both of these people looked, the scene, their expertise. The battle proceeded, the fatigue started too in the middle of between the two warriors. The spring to their means became heavier, and the strikes messy and slow. The hero hopped away, shuriken being tossed from his hand. Most went wide, and the rest redirected and evaded. Kunai were waved by the two sides as they met each other, each strike intended to kill, held back nothing. The singing of metal, as they rejected and conflicted. Until the blondie was incapacitated, the kunai vanishing in the timberland. He was excessively delayed to stop an assault, a wheeze, as a blade dove into his coat. A smoke bomb detonated, and the harmed one flew into the trees. He bowed against the storage compartment, with stressed and calm pants. "You're still around here, right? Simply surrender," words yelled from a tracker. Naruto's hand went to the kunai implanted in the coat, and hauled it out. The tip of the cutting edge was covered in blood. "Come on out. Truly, for what reason do you even attempt?" The individual hollered. "There's no utilization, it's irredeemable. Simply surrender." "Could you surrender, on attempting to make me surrender?" Everything froze, the two characters still and inert. Naruto wrinkled his foreheads, a thumb going to his tooth and flicking it. The scene turned around, before the person bounced into the trees. Once more, it went on, and the two connected with each other before he restarted it by and by. They expressed various things, or accomplished something different. "That can't be correct," he mumbled. A glare, and a murmur. The day obscured, however he proceeded to attempt to fix it. The hours passed. He surrendered, and situated his back against a tree trunk. Naruto watched the person he was named after, in another scene that he could review, and another. Practically every one of them had a similar irksome issue: it didn't feel right. Naruto produced on, until the second it was everywhere. I neglected, he mumbled. I believed that was unimaginable, it appeared to be such a long time ago. The particulars lost in his memory. Neglecting to imagine the scene to its accurate portrayal felt like he soiled the memory. He couldn't as expected honor it, not when he didn't have the material. Anyway, horrible the acknowledgement, he would always remember the message inside. He guessed that is where it made a difference. He needed to accomplish something different. The deafening cries woke him. Like an ensemble that sung together as one. Rehashed by many the rodents in the skies. He was going off the deep end, they weren't adjusted in any way. Then he heard the waves, tranquilly clearing along the shore. He woke him up to see a seagull. It made an honest effort to casually approach, evading and nudging along the ground trying to be covert. Naruto sat up. The unexpected development panicked it. The seagull shouted at him and took off. There was such large numbers of them in the skies. Along the shore, around the ocean, and on top of drifting bits of wood. There was no indication of his boat, other than the flotsam and jetsam that had a place with the frame. What irritated him more than anything was his broken lips and dry throat. His head beat, and he felt sand adhere to his hair. Lethargically, he stood up. A boat wreck obviously, in a bizarre place where there is some place obscure. He watched the froth from the sea float shorewards. The salt water looked strong, delicious to him, yet he realized the ocean wouldn't dry his throat. She just felt the need to sink the boat. That was not something pleasant to do. It was exceptionally inconsiderate. Presently he lost everything, or so he thought. Coins clunked together as shook his jacket liberated from the sand. However, he had little else other than the salt-crusted garments on his back. With nothing else to do, he strolled the shore. Through an regular quarry, he experienced a huge cove, molded like a sickle moon. The tide went lower, and he watched the salt water retreat from the sound until it was just a pool of water in the center. Continuing through, he remained in sight of the seaside. It was numerous hours until he tracked down any similarity to human progress. Stowed away from the fretful sea, and into a recess. A harbor rested with a boat attached to it. Naruto followed a well-used way beaten by long stretches of journeys. Secret more profound over a slope, a little house rested in a clearing. He heard the beating cleave of wood being fragmented, they thumped together as they were arranged. The smell of fish was weighty, and close by on a table were newly gotten fish stacked in columns. Naruto went nearer to the sound, and he saw the wellspring of the commotion. A tall, maturing man was currently cutting wood. He was seen, a snort as the significant hatchet laid on the more odd's shoulder. Vigilant dim eyes chose him. He was quiet for some time as he was checked. I don't get a lot of guests, he said bluntly. I cleaned up aground, Naruto answered. His voice coarse. It was astonishing for converse with someone else. The man scratched his facial hair with a calloused hand, from all the fishing and work he finished with his hands. You alone? He asked, vigilant however concerned. Only myself, there was no other person ready. I guess you're glad to be alive. Naruto chose not to reply. The man dug his hatchet into an enormous stump. He cleaned his hands, "Hey now, you look sad. The least I can do is assist a requiring with monitoring." He gestured as opposed to talking. He was directed to the patio of the lodge, yet at the same not inside. Rather he was told to stand by while the elderly person got anything he wanted inside. There were a couple of suspicions of the man's life. The prize of a hog hung over the entryway, the stowaway of a creature spread to dry on some contraption in the corner. This was a man of nature, who lived off the wild and maybe delighted in it. He got back with a plate of food and a pitcher. The man put the things on a table, and said he could eat. Once more, he left. The smell of flavored fish and potatoes hit his noses, advising him that he was starving and parched. Naruto dove into the food with energy, however, he peered toward the pitcher with interest. There was no cup, however the man got back with several glasses and filled them. The man gave him a glass that he cautiously took. "Care to tell me of your difficulties that landed you here?" Naruto acknowledged it wasn't water, yet wine, all things being equal. The weighty smell of something fruity attacked his noses. He took a taste. The peculiar taste of liquor helped him to remember his lord unintentionally slipping him a jar of wine rather than water. It suggested a flavor like spoiled natural product. He was sufficiently parched to not be irritated by it to an extreme, and took a liberal, making a difference. "There's not a lot to say. I was separated from everyone else adrift, when a tempest shocked me, as well as someone in particular." "Not acquainted with the ocean?" he inquired. Naruto shook his head as he ate and drank more. "For what reason would you say you were out there then?" "I needed to see the world." "Then you should return where you came from. This is certainly not a delightful spot." He shrugged. "There's nothing for me, so I should track down something." Naruto had completed his food by then, at that point, as there wasn't a lot to eat. Which left him with the wine. "What will you do now?" he inquired. "Travel. Where is the closest town?" "There's a street down that way, take a left and you ought to show up in 2 or 3 hours. "Much obliged to you," Naruto answered. "In the event that I gave you a portion of these coins, could you have the option to give a pack and a few supplies?" "What did you like?" "Simply a cover, a smidgen of food and a jar for water." He had a pocketful of coins in this fantasy. It very well may be basically as unlimited as he needed it. He didn't, however. He counted the sum and ensured it was all he had. Bits of silver and gold. The man took a few and headed inside. Naruto tasted on his beverage and paused. It wasn't long until the man gotten back with the things. "Much thanks," he answered. The man gestured, taking one more cup of wine. "You're leaving at present?" "I have something vital to do," the man gestured. He was a few words. It was a good thing. At the point when Naruto started his journey toward the town, he understood he neglected to give the man a name. He would improve. He had absolutely no worries at all, despite the fact that it wasn't his. Now and again, he was unable to rest. Frequently, he would gaze above him, whether it was the brilliant sky, or the overhang of trees or anything by any stretch of the imagination. It was in these times his psyche would meander openly. Notwithstanding his endeavors to zero in on doing this activity or that goal. Presently, he saw murkiness and that's it, and regardless of what direction he looked it was all he saw. Pretty much nothing remained to be seen, and felt like it attacked his detects. His ears rung in the quiet. This was an abnormality. There were minutes, when he envisioned her showing up once more. Through some style when the world adapted to her will and change in turn. Every one of the regulations he made were made invalid. At times, he contemplated whether that is the manner by which she saw this present reality. The guidelines didn't concern her, all things being equal, they adjusted and consented. It was the means by which she anticipated that things should work. He wasn't sure about that, it was just his own contemplations. Indeed, even in this phony world, he wanted things to be pretty much as comparative with respect to the truth where he actually gazed at the lady holding him by the neck. His heart sped at the possibility of her appearance. The plaguing haziness was unnatural. However, that died down since his psyche was free. He anticipated that she should show up, and he felt the presence. He didn't need her here. It would be so natural for her to overlook, to think outside the box and uncover herself. However, his vision returned, or all light gotten back to the earth. He didn't know which one it was, in the event that she evaded the edges of his faculties or he tricked himself. He thrashed around in the basic cover. It was as yet dim, the moon sparkled brilliantly. The silver beams puncturing through the trees. Time was something critical. That was one thing he had no control over, whether the sun rose or plunged. He generally held questions, that she controlled his feeling of time. It would make sense if someplace down the line close to the end, she would agree that he wasn't mostly right now. It was normal, and he didn't know whether he might at any point make do, assuming she bamboozled him. Some of the time, he wasn't sure how frequently he thought this, assuming it was the first or the 100th time. Naruto stood and chose to make a fire for himself. He wouldn't get to rest this evening. He gazed into the whipping red ringlets, popping and snapping. Fire was significant, it drove away the animals of the evening and the actual haziness. There was a lot of kindling to go on until sunrise. He yawned and ate dry bread, it was hard to swallow without somewhat fluid to flush it down. Naruto reclined, and gazed at the stars for quite a long time. He heard the means first. The soil crunching underneath his guest's feet. It was anything but an individual by any stretch of the imagination. No, this guest was a wolf, huge and savage. "Hey," he said. Obviously, the monster didn't answer. It gazed with canny eyes. With sluggish developments, he looked for a pocket and recovered a piece of salted jerky. He held it out to the wolf and paused. It followed toward him, its mouth creeping toward his hand, and got the piece of meat. It ate uproariously, and carelessly. "You realize I have more in this pocket, right?" he grinned. "In the event that you keep close by, perhaps I'll give you more." From the get-go, he thought it was the early morning haze that slithered through the brushes and trees. However, he rushed to fix that thought once he inhaled it in. The hints of smoke were toxin to his lungs. He covered his mouth with a fabric and proceeded. It was no big surprise why the air had unusual smell. The further he strolled through the littered way, the hazier the smoke developed. A foul smell hit him, and he crinkled his nose. The unforgiving smoke started to water his eyes, however he would have rather not dismissed. Other than the smoke that streamed around his developments, it kept a terrible speed, whole and undirected by wind. It started to thicken, and he had to blow it away with a whirlwind when he could never again stand it. He looked behind him, however he saw no hint of the wolf. It had vanished the previous evening after a couple more treats. Poor person, he thought. The foliage scattered that transformed into a wide valley. Dark mists hung overhead, the breeze was free, projecting wild spins of smoke. In the valley underneath, he saw the leftovers of a town. There was a little palace in sight, and others more modest wooden structures. Many were destroyed in stacks and shrouded in smoke. Not a spirit in sight. He descended a winding worn way. Debris cried, adhering to grass and his own dress. He arrived at the base and moved close. There was an entry with a messed-up door, fragmented and covered with bolts. On the opposite side of the door, bodies littered the ground shrouded in mud and blood. A crow peered toward him, vacillating its wings in apprehension. He meandered through the leftovers of the town. There were no flames, just consumed establishments and sparkling coals. The straightforward ways drove him toward the little palace, a channel worked around it with its palace span raised. "Vagabond," somebody called from the palace. They weren't noticeable until they looked between two sections. Others showed up along the wall, weapons good to go. What carries an alien to a struck town? He was defensively covered in comparable design to the initial two Hokage, or the samurai in the place that is known for iron. A tracker by the ocean helped me, and pointed me here. One of the trackers. "Tell me, what was his name?" He glared. "He didn't have that data, we didn't share our names." "Helpful," somebody above yelled. "In any case," the pioneer said. "You didn't take from the dead, nor the houses. I will be lean to trust you. On the off chance that you're lying, I'll chase you down myself." Sure. All things considered, I should request that you leave. We're in no situation to acknowledge anybody." He felt crippled, yet gestured no different either way. "Watch for the streets, it isn't okay for movement during circumstances such as the present." However, he was being dismissed. It was a simple method for getting himself out, and he didn't even try to think back. He remained external the entryway for some time. He didn't have a lot of provisions, as he expected to top off here. Presently he would need to hold on until the following town, however he didn't have any idea where or when that would be. Thus, he did what he could do, walk the main worn street. The possibly time he halted was the point at which he saw the outsider out and about. From the get-go, he thought they conveyed a staff, yet the edge toward the end put that idea to an end. At the point when he drew nearer, he understood it was a lady. She was wearing light calfskin protection. She checked out at him with doubt. All in all, what's a solitary more bizarre strolling unarmed in a period like this? "For what reason is a furnished one holding me up?" he inquired. "It's my strolling stick," she answered. "I can hit individuals with it as well, I presume." Her hair was white, however short, it didn't go past her shoulders. Her eyes were blue, noticeable with her pale elements. "I guess it doesn't make any difference, you don't have them," she proceeded. "What's more, I'm in good company." There was something behind him, and when he looked he observed that it was the wolf from the previous evening. It gave little consideration to him other than passing by to sit behind the lady. "Not of their fragrance," it said. "Like moronic amicable meat sack, yet more unusual." He flickered. "I didn't realize you could talk." "He enjoys you," the lady said. "It offended me." "He didn't eat you, didn't he?" she countered. "That implies something." "Better believe it, it implies I'm not dead." He heard the light patter of downpour. He looked above, seeing the beads tumbling from the foreboding shadows. It was a light downpour, however it could get more brutal. I have a camp close by, come or don't, she dismissed and got off the street. Very much like that. You were somewhat not really agreeable simply prior. I trust Oagran's statement enough, a sideways look before she went on into the shrubs. Oagran, the wolf followed intently behind without saving another look. It was a greeting. It wasn't precisely one he could deny. Thus, he followed them. It was a short, yet packed stroll through the shrubs. There appeared to be no reasonable path other than whatever they abandoned. The smell of preparing food was a charming change from smoke. They showed up in an especially level region, covered by the downpour over, a cooking pot loomed over a warm fire, in the corner was a fabric hung over a stopgap cover produced using branches. The lady put her weapon by a sack. I am Altasai. Better believe it, no doubt, unfamiliar name, deal with it. Naruto, he answered. Warm and dry, helpful. The wolf interfered. It sat down on a bed of pine prior to shutting its eyes. The lady was situated on a huge stone, blending the pot with a spoon. You really do realize that you're continuing in the strides of a military? I sort of speculated that from the street, so why? It's not exactly protected, Altasai said. She appeared to be happy with her food and drawn out a bowl. I'm exceptionally lost, he answered. I don't have any idea where I am, or even what this nation is named. Individuals don't make an appearance out of no place, she answered. He was given the bowl and spoon. He said thanks to her, and took a chomp from the soup. It was excessively pungent, however it was hot food. Then he made sense of on how he became here. Ha, she said. That will make it happen. Naruto reviewed there could have been no other street except for the one he strolled. You said that, I didn't have them, what did that mean? She was quiet for some time, gazing at falling trickles from a close-by branch. She had completed her food and started to remove her calfskin protection. These dim edges, Obsidian request, they're the ones who went after that town a few days ago. Goodness, why? She grunted, war, clearly. You truly don't have the foggiest idea about this spot, isn't that right? He shook his head. It's nothing new, this one despises that one, this one needs this thing, this one been insulted, so they battle. Goodness, he answered. She appeared to be outrageously obscure. See, I scarcely understand this spot better compared to you do. You believe I will recall this multitude of spots' names. However, however you appear to know this request. Altasai shrugged, they took something from me, I need it back. Presently spotless that bowl, okay? He did as she asked and brought it back. She got under her little sanctuary and rested up against the huge dim wolf. For what reason did you help me? Everybody here detests outcasts. I haven't sat down briefly to chat with anybody in a long time. She tapped the wolf like a lap canine. Since he can talk doesn't mean he needs as well. You could never have been really awful on the off chance that he hadn't torn you separated. He scowled. I feel much better. She laughed. You didn't appear to be so stressed when we met out and about. What else is there to do? I'm a ninja, he answered. I can do a ton of things without a weapon, as a matter of fact I generally favor it. She murmured. A ninja, huh? I caught wind of them, there is definitely not a ton left hereabouts. Yeah. Naruto said. He watched out into the shrubberies, the sky appeared to become more obscure continuously. Altasai yawned, and folded her shroud over her, the closest town several days away on this street, so we'll be going the same way assuming the request goes there. Should I'd say, he got the significance all right, should, they were secured in time everlasting. Sharp edges and monsters sheathed in blood. Cries and howls reverberating in the slopes. The land was painted dull blood, and covered with bodies. There was not a single town to be found, given, as it should be an entirely separate day until they arrived at it. Altasai looked strongly at the landmark, while Oagran sniffed the air. No utilization, I can't make out anything, what about you? See any of those sharp edges I referenced? Altasai said. Naruto took a gander at her, and she shrugged. I was simply pondering, perhaps you had great sight being a ninja whatnot. Down underneath was a wreck, he was unable to see their sharp edges substantially less their countenances. No penance had a place with them either, just having a place with some military. We ought to draw a nearer look, track down them. Down there? He asked distrustfully. Dislike we will go along with, she answered. He was unable to dissent since she previously went off. Oagran snarled, however he didn't know why. A decent smell, there will be no craving this evening. Presently he knew, that is screwed up, the wolf gave no consideration and limited after the lady. He murmured. There would presumably be a great deal of strays severing from the primary armed force. It would be more secure on the off chance that they were together. However, when he made a stride, he felt it. This deception broke. Everything turned in reverse. Fallen men got back to their feet with their injuries recuperated, the flames kicked the bucket, and the front line left like it was immaculate. Until it was two armed forces confronting each other down on an enormous field. Then they charged at each other by and by. Perhaps he could utilize some work with this, however he didn't precisely have anybody to check whether it was adequate. His late guide was an essayist, he might have been a great deal of help. What he could do was hang tight for her. Do you hunger for things like this? A shudder. He folded his arms and looked beneath. No, why? She asked curiously. He kept quiet, yet she was still there. Yet again the militaries conflicted. I've had a ton of time to think, he said. This occurs, and regardless of whether I at any point have the opportunity to stop the battling, it could repeat. Kaguya murmured, this was perpetual when I previously showed up. It was an irritation, so I shut down it. He knew the story, she ate a product of the god tree, then, at that point, all the battling halted. The hair goddess, they generally called her. He felt air clean out from his nose, entertained. You make it sound simple. Naruto didn't intend to save a look. Indeed, even as she remained there, she felt powerful, and that didn't appear so unrealistic. It was, Kaguya answered. Not even one of you had power as you did now. They opposed, obviously, yet not exactly like you. I would trust so, he constrained himself to dismiss. You can will anything to be valid, yet you pick this? Naruto focused on Kaguya, her eyes restricted at the annihilation underneath. Lose or lose. It would end somehow. Lose somewhat less maybe. Residue or passing. They couldn't seal Kaguya. Would it be a good idea for him he fall? However, maybe. How is it for you? Do you watch all my minutes? Does time elapse equivalent to mine, consistently per minute, or does it feel quicker for you? Reply, she said. The champions underneath were slow, as through water. The blood sprayed through the air, nearly freezing completely still. This occurs, it's consistent with us, he answered. Perhaps it's simply a piece of us, I don't know, yet there's still great in spite of everything. Love I presume. He took a look, yet she stayed perpetual. Her looks generally continued as before. He contemplated whether she was consistently similar to that. However, he thought about his time here and he didn't feel very as entirety. How abnormal, she replied. Then, at that point, she left. What made her like that? Where could your actual domain be? You talked so exceptionally of it. It was an odd idea that popped to mind, that this was the first time a lady was in quite a while room. The other being that she had never visited so not long after she left. Another, that he was blissful about it. She strolled about, gazing at various household items. Her long hair and dress hauled along the floor. How could it get so lengthy? He calculated his seat toward her, the paper being neglected. I figured you would have favored it, she added. Regardless of whether I can't oversee it constantly. It's bizarre, isn't it? It's not genuine, it's simply my creative mind, and that requires a great deal of exertion. I simply utilize this spot to outline it. Likewise, I've been truly diverted by my viewpoints. All that time he talked, she tuned in. Kaguya had gazed through a window at passing people on foot. Since these spots I made isn't yours, do they feel as truly as this present reality? There's little distinction. He had a thought that it wasn't. For the present, I think yours and the genuine one would be similarly as extraordinary at this moment. Then you yield. Hold up, I don't fault you for that one, he said. She squinted her eyes, and it not in that frame of mind of way that said she was irritated that her deadly strike didn't kill him. She named her head, it was practically unnoticeable. The huge word is correct now, that doesn't mean incorporate the lament I'd feel just later. She turned around to gazing through the window. He had been distracted, so he hadn't gotten back to the past world. You know, it's insane the way in which 100 years have disappeared. Had opportunity and energy to contemplate numerous things. I can say that I'm ready to fall flat. It required me a long investment to find a sense of peace with it. She didn't say anything. I think about the thing I'm getting at, Kaguya, would you say you are ready to fizzle? Naruto couldn't resist the opportunity to grin when her elements bended into rage. Outrage was a simple inclination, not so much as a goddess was invulnerable. He couldn't resist the opportunity to continue to push away from this dispassion. It resembles a murmur toward the rear of your head, you don't for even a moment understand it's not even your voice, yet it didn't make any difference. Kurama did that to me, empowering my fury in agony. It felt better, I could do such countless things. Naruto shut his eyes and reviewed that large number of times he took power. Did the Ten Tails do that to you as well? He gazed into her white eyes, seeing everything about any inclination would surface. Her forehead wrinkled, a flare alit inside them that sent his heart dashing. She left. His appendages couldn't quit shaking as he moved down the rough bluffs. He shuddered, and it followed down his back. His palms felt damp, he was unable to grasp anything on the wet rocks. He could hear the sounds and drums of war, regardless of whether he was unable to see them any longer. He was unable to sit tight for her following visit. Then, at that point, he recollected that he didn't have to hold anything. He jumped off the little precipice and approaching the mouth of the backwoods. You are right there, Altasai mumbled. He was removed from his viewpoints. I thought you might have been a quitter. She remained alongside her sidekick, its wolf eyes inquisitive. No, he answered. He felt short of breath. As a matter of fact, I'm somewhat anticipating this. She grinned. Great, since I was considering what I ought to do in the event that I went over a ninja. On the off chance that it's in any way similar to back home, ninja are aces in the hole. Altasite gestured at Oagran, and it limited off. She followed the wolf with him close by. What do you mean by that? He inquired. A speed was set, not exactly running, not exactly strolling. They crawled forward through a wild game path, kept near steep rough slope. There's relatively few around any longer, and you're profoundly sought after on the grounds that you changed the war zone. You can envision the strategies. Right, I haven't exactly thought about a conflict that don't have shinobi. The battling didn't appear to get any stronger regardless of that they've drawn nearer. Maybe it was slope. How would you are familiar this? She grimaced. I was a commander, once. It was all she shared, however she believed something should do with obsidian request. He considered what it very well may be, in the event that she was able to go through a disaster area to contact them. He practically stumbled, and the others behind searched in stress. His appendages felt shackled, weighted. He opposed, attempting to free them. Consistently they became heavier and he tumbled to his knees. The world froze, and he glanced around, attempting to see as her. He ended up remaining at her hand under his jaw and her long, sharp nails diving into his cheeks. My will was my own. He grinned, however it was not in joke. Would you say you are certain? You left, briefly, you questioned yourself. So resistant, will it be as far as possible? She growled. He needed to snicker. All that he felt, how weighty his heart beat, his locator tips should be excoriated. Her inhales that followed down his throat sent goose pimples all through his body. How those white eyes were ablaze with rage. In this way, you really do feel some feeling all things considered. Her hand fixed, making him self-conscious. I don't know whether I even envisioned this or not, yet somebody said I could annoy anybody. Go on, make me right. You believe you're shrewd, Kaguya said. Every one of the responses and arrangements have come to you. She crushed one final time, lifted him, and discarded him. The world went dim, he was unable to try and see his nose, or anything before him. You might have killed me quite a while in the past, yet this is the last opportunity for my chakra. How might you try and achieve that? You anticipate that I should do your offering? To lay still and allow you to have me? Her voice was all over the place, however he was unable to see her. Oppress, Wabunta rehash, and you follow my orders. His felt it, something natural toward the side of his psyche. It sounded ludicrous, in any case, dare as he could attempt to say it, he shouldn't. You never brought this up, never expressed it for an opportunity for me to say it. Kaguya showed up then, at that point, similar to a holy messenger in the dimness. One with information on it. That instinctual feeling was dread, or maybe a feeling of a risk. He somewhat disregarded what he could do move in reality. He saw all chakra. I won't ever say it. We will see. You will either kick the bucket, or yield. You failed to remember a third decision. I get out, he answered. Definitely, it's a small opportunity, however I'm somewhat enjoying those chances. She squinted her eyes in this murkiness, where it was just her in view. She jeered, 1 more 1,000 years. He gritted his teeth, it's been 200 years, she added more. Some way or another, he didn't exactly mind it. This lady, who made his heart shudder and filled it with fear simultaneously. The fire in his heart chilled off. You know, I saw something. After this time, you not even once tormented me, why's that? Why should I? He wondered if he was dreaming, but was that disgust? Did she abhor violence? He recalled the time he had been stabbed with her all-killing ash bone. He had remembered the authentic panic, but it was about painless. If she acquainted acerbity in disgust, could there be others? You're accommodating to delay that long, that was crazy. I will, she replied. Yet, I accept abstruse as well. The apple began to brighten, and he fell to his knees again. His limbs were locked, like earlier. He looked anon into her eyes, but he didn't apperceive what she was possibly planning. His ambience started to change, a flame one abode to the next. No one is afterwards fear, she said. All he could ask himself is what did she fear? About him, it angry from one anamnesis to the next. Bodies and locations that he knew, those real, and things he created inside. What are you doing? He was abashed so badly, it hurt. His affection trembled, but he acquainted the action in his bones. This was article out of his control, that he didn't accept to manually access and manipulate. The apple appeared to be like home, a accustomed moon abashed in the sky. About him, he accustomed anybody he knew in the complete world. They about acquainted tangible, if he battened to them would they reply? It would be about as acceptable as the complete thing. Those trapped in a dream, of aggregate they all admired to arise true. No longer, bathed in argent moonlight, she swept her duke and they angry to dust. Everything, the world, the moon, alike her. It came to him then. She was his abhorrent love. There was no sun, there was no moon. He wasn't alike assertive how abounding years had passed. In fact, it could accept been canicule for all he knew. There was him and this void. She additionally fabricated no appearance. What was one to do in such a place? All he could do was delay and think. Be abandoned for all time. Naruto anticipation of his adventure that he aloof started, and never got to finish. He had anticipation a lot about it, alike afore Kaguya abandoned the ability she accepted in this dream world. For now, his thoughts didn't assume to backpack able-bodied with his imagination. Autograph at bottom ward seemed to assignment best, acuteness was added aqueous and directed. Then, he visualized it, acted it out. Now, all he could any time anticipate was in summaries, the mural and bodies were shaky, anniversary articulation ambiguous and repeating, the effect was missing. If he got out of here, he wouldn't apperception autograph it down. It was activity to be annual of revenge, of alienated war and all the asinine backroom of sending bodies to die. A personal. It articulates so bruised if he had to put it in the summary. What was he to do? Naruto anticipation a lot about Kaguya. What he knew about her, and those he can acquisition out. Aggregate she said afresh in his head. What was he to do? He yelled his affection out. Screaming into the abyss, but there no complete that echoed in the world. It was consumed, drowned, and asleep aggregate he threw at it. What did she learn? Bareness was article he never capital to acknowledgement to. All he could do was activity in his thoughts. She was listening, she was consistently watching. Tell me, Kaguya, you're someone, you charge abhorrence article in world, he asked. There was no response, and he afresh it again. Over and over. He ability as able-bodied abrade the hell out of her until she could booty it no longer. He said abundant accord abounding things. He might have yelled for canicule or years. Tell me Kaguya, with complete certainty, can you acquaint me that the 10 cape fabricated you into a husk, accomplishing annihilation added than chase its bidding? I bethink the feeling, the raw ache it carried, annihilation added than an instinct, a charge to accumulate chakra. To be abounding and whole, and you wanna apperceive what it was? A brainless creature, like a little fucking insect. Is that what you are? There was a but about his neck, asthmatic him. Furious eyes apathetic into him, I am no such thing. How bad-tempered you are, I don't alike apperceive the acceptation of the word, he grinned, hit a nerve. I told you I was acceptable at pissing bodies off. There was article aberrant about all this. He acquainted a vertigo, and he didn't absolutely accept why he acquainted that way. New images came to life. It took a moment to acclimatize the anticipation of up and bottomward absolute again. The ambience of mountains and forests he couldn't recognize. There was the god timberline in the distance, the sun abaft its visage that casted its abundant contour above the land. Then, there was smoke that atramentus horizon. A abundant broom that blanketed the apple as far as he can see. It was a acreage of ash and soot, the apple had been set alight. The amore of the sun that fell on his face. The air-conditioned wind that brushed amid his fingers. How the clouds that swept over him fabricated his clothes wet. She crafted detail that he couldn't manage, or that it acquainted so new he couldn't acquaint the difference. Plumes of smoke blousy the land, ascent into the air that he couldn't acquaint afar from clouds slash. Bottomward below, the debris of a action connected past. He could aroma the afterlife and decay, he could alike aftertaste it. It fabricated him uneasy. All that war, never ending, and what of now? It has never stopped, a charge to kill, it had never afflicted with you all. Like insects, as you allege of me. So, all of you ability as able-bodied be of final use. A goddess, aren't you? You get to accept who dies, which is everyone. How did you any time arise to chief like that? One day, you crawled out of bed, and decided, welp I'm gonna fucking annihilate everything, God. You piss me off, I anticipate we can allotment that title, champions of our category. Quiet. His aperture disappeared, and he fabricated no noise. What the fuck? Maybe he could achieve assurance language. Shit, if abandoned he knew assurance language. His aperture reappeared, acknowledge her. Do that afresh and I win, how so? I get the moral achievement duh. You're abashed of what I accept to say, fear you? Her eyes alit with action and laughed. It was the distinct best admirable complete he had any time heard. He wouldn't apperception audition more. Yeah, he smiled. Look at you, laughing, too bad it was absolutely creepy, and in no way I was aggravating to be funny, I accept no acumen to abhorrence you. Annihilation you say, is worthless. Yet actuality she stood, talking, listening. He would win either way, but he wouldn't appetite to shut up forever, you said so yourself, and aloof like how we're abounding with hate, there is no one afterwards fear. Kaguya, you can't be your own actuality if you don't abhorrence anything. She didn't answer, once again, you begin your metal. It's because of you, he capital to say. He kept his aperture shut. It was the strangest affair to any time think. How sad. Once, it had been his company that kept him going. To achieve an ambition that had ancestral to him. Now, what fueled him was back she visited. All in adjustment to survive. For now, his greatest backbone was Kaguya, and she would leave him if she began out. Afterlife was bigger than loneliness. Yeah, he smiled. There was addition acumen too. I'm academic. This is how the 10 Cape managed to get to you, during all those years, it boring addle your boldness into nothing. The abandoned ability that occurred back I captivated the 10 Cape was that its ability wasn't sufficient. The goddess did abhorrence article afterwards beneath all that buried emotion. She had said she accustomed here, so there were others like her. Did she abhorrence them? Were there added stronger beings than her? The 10 Cape preyed on that fear. Again, she abandoned him. Whatever it was, there was no beam of anger. It seemed that she additionally had aggregate her resolve. She stepped close, her duke comatose on his cheek. He was abashed at the contact, the acute amore of her hand. If you were to accompany longevity, such effect would not brace able-bodied with it. Longevity? Why would I appetite such a thing? Peace, how should you any time accumulate it? He sighed, why do we befitting singing this aforementioned song and dance? It will not last. He accepted bodies bigger than her. Emotion was what fabricated me able in the aboriginal place, he replied. Not aloof love. My anger, my fear, and anguish are what got me actuality in the aboriginal place. If I was annihilation like you are now, I would accept died connected ago. She had larboard again. It kept him activity until the abutting time she appeared. It took a while to annals that Kaguya was actuality in the flesh. How connected had she stood there? She stared bottomward on him and said nothing. He couldn't alike arise up with annihilation to say, all he could do is beam in wonder. Only a aeon has passed, can you do addition 9? His affection dropped. No, he couldn't. It was his aboriginal thought. These doubts had consistently arise to him, back he had been young, back he was training. He had consistently autonomous to abstain it, he capital to prove it wrong. He acted about giving up. He already knew the word, a like cerebration about it seemed dangerous. Wabuntha. It had never larbored his apperception already it came from her lips. It dangled and advanced him, like his admired food, and little aftertaste and it would be bliss. If he were to say it, would there be an atom of beatitude in her eyes? It was appetizing to see, that perhaps, that would be his aftermost sight. He about cried at the thought. Yeah, she would be blessed or maybe not. Added thoughts appeared, anniversary added apparative than the last. He confused his lips, as if to allure it. There was article in the distance. He acquainted it, article adopted and accustomed altogether. Article he hadn't acquainted in a time afore he was trapped in here. His gut tingled, the acknowledgement of a long-lost power. He acquainted addition shockwave coursing through this darkness. Kurama, he whispered. He sat up, amusement in the feel of his partner. Kurama was aggravating to breach through this apparition to chargeless him. How connected had anesthetized in the complete world. Seconds. Minutes. He stared at Kaguya, his opponent, his love. Her airy accord was replaced by a wariness, attentive to join the surges to accumulate him oral the illusion. He knew that alike with Kurama's might, he wouldn't be able to breach through. Right now, at least. She was too prepared. "I appetite to apperceive something, Kaguya," he replied. He acquainted disembodied. Addition billow of power, and he acquainted like he could go on. "Is this how you developed the infinite Tsukiyomi? For one person, then, you fabricated it better?" She didn't accept to say annihilation for him to apperceive the answer. The attending in her eye said all. His aperture twitched into a smile, in an aberrant way. "It's candid of you. To booty the time to achieve a person's dream arise accurate afore they die. As affected as it is, I would admire to accepted you afore you were afflicted by the 10 tails. Kaguya's eyes narrowed, and he could say the arresting abashing present oral them. She abolished again. He laid down, aggravating to refamiliarize with Kurama's chakra. He acquainted traces of it, blind in the air. There were no surges, but he knew it would abandon be some time until the abutting one. Naruto acquainted the amazing in his tips of his fingers. The anticipations that formed off him in waves. He knew it, this was the alpha of the end. Kurama charge except abandoned accomplished that he had been bound oral her technique. He wouldn't accord up so easily. 3 surges had reverberated through the illusion, but how abundant time would canyon until the abutting attempt. There was no faculty of time, no sun or clock. Those had been taken away. It was an acceptable affair, he had a lot of time to anticipate about it. Finally, article of worth, article of progress. He had one try, and abandoned that. His affection exhausted was article that Kaguya couldn't booty away. He counted the beats of his heart, filtered by minute, by hour, by day, anniversary and month. Now, he had the accepted time frame. It was about addition 50 years afore he acquainted the abutting surges of Kurama's chakra exploding through. Now, he had to accept the absolute heartbeat. He had gotten bigger with multitasking back. He was brought here, with all his attempts to breathe the apple to life. Another 50 years, and he had it bottom ward to the second, but he had to achieve certain, so addition 50 years had passed. Something had to go amiss forth the way, and it had been article he had anticipation about. She embodied out of from the darkness, with connected anemic beard that flowed abaft her white eyes centered on him. His apperception emptied, and his affection started to race. Advance broken, and now he had to annual for her appearance. He counted his beats, and it raced alert as fast, and the odd skip. Has your acknowledgement changed? Did she accredit to their aboriginal conversation? That was a fucking connected time ago. Well, I gotta accord it to you, no one can breach the aforementioned for hundreds of years. She was pleased, a slight tug at her lips. He admired the sight. Who knows, the end will acquaint it all. I anticipate that's one affair we got in common, we're both assertive that we'll succeed, one of us will fail, the added will win, he finished. He approved to focus, to calm himself as abundant as he could. I'll prove to you, that I will last. Such as moments as these, he had to catechism his sanity. Was that a adumbration of account in her eyes, or was it his admiring to see article like that? Naruto continued, my mother already said article to me, about actuality at Jinchuriki. I ambition addition told you that, so none of this would accept happened. She looked wary, that is. He was about let it apart from his lips. Later, maybe at the end, it can be the end now. Later, he replied. Conceivably he would never know, or she would any time accept that the 10 cape afflicted her. In the end, it was authentic admiration on his allotment to apperceive that she was already human. I don't anticipate you'd accept a body and army, you're able abundant on your own, or maybe aloof addition to advice out. There's no one, there was him. Remember that one time, back I showed you the history of the shinobi? She was about impassive, but there was a exhausted of her brow, and her eyes flashed with annoyance. Annihilation added than that. What do you anticipate of that? He asked. To actualize article as that, is an abomination. He grinned, well, it still got you didn't it? She didn't attending at him, ridiculous, and I don't charge to explain myself to you. It affairs little, because I'm activity to die right. What use do I accept for it? Well, what's the use of anything? If that's the case, afresh you can explain it to me. She didn't though, she left. Not that it was time aloof yet. That was still years bottomward the line, but the final amplitude was the longest yet. His affection exhausted alternate to normal, and he accounted for that time. Still, this aftermost and abandoned plan of his depended on her. That she would be absorbed in audition him out. If she didn't arise to him oral several minutes, afresh he would accept to delay addition time. He abandoned how abundant time he had left, and how connected he had been here. Now, all there was larboard to do was attending to the future. Yet, what did that authority for him? He hardly accustomed it any thought, because previously, all that accessible him was afterlife and arrogant achievement of escaping. Now it was slim, but it was far better. The abandoned thoughts that came to him was that one of them will lose, and one of them will win. To accord into her was to prove that she was right. Failure wasn't an option. He looked at his hands, they trembled, and his abdomen askance until he could know best ball to look. He grasped at his heart, and it acquainted addled and abundant oral his chest. Something wet fell from his cheeks, and an abashed sob able from him. Was this how it acquainted then? He couldn't bawl to go on afterwards her, it wasn't article he wanted. That was consistently article he lived by, that he lived abandoned by his friends, and never for himself. So, he waited, until the exhausted of affection neared for the end. Kaguya, he said. The name slipped out of his aperture easily, you appetite to apperceive that answer. Of what my mother said. He wondered if he waited a connected while, but it was abandoned several beats of his heart. She appeared the aforementioned as the added times. Like a apparition that appeared in the darkness, but she was brightest affair in the abyss. I'm not absorbed in abandoned information, then why did she appear? And why did the aboriginal about did she ask to continue? No one was able of actuality alone, that was impossible. I'll acquaint you anyway, she looked disinterested, but that was annihilation different. My mother already said, that it was adulation that kept the tailed barbarian bankrupt oral us. The adulation we had for our village, our people, and friends. Is that so? Her eyes narrowed. Perhaps if you focused on what you could have adequate most, rather than what you feared, you wouldn't be as you are today. Foolish. What's foolish? That you're so bent up in one way, that addition one is unspeakable. Bigger yet, why attending one way, back you can attending it both. She narrowed her eyes, and it was piercing. She didn't speak, so he continued. I'm that added way, he stated. Can you absolutely say that? She asked. The abhorrence of what will appear to your bonds that always fabricated you baffle me, that is what you fueled you. He smiled, you would be right, but abandoned for a time. I fabricated a vow, that I would last, and that I would prove to you and whatever these added ones you're abashed of, that the 10 tails and some carbon army wouldn't be needed. Answer, she demanded. So I will, he replied. Kaguya, I fabricated a vow to you. The acumen I'm still here, is to prove that adulation wins, and gives you the backbone bare to go on, and I can do this forever. Adulation did that, and I've been aggressive all this time. The acumen I can do that, is because I adulation you, I would accept accustomed up connected ago if it weren't for you. It was like she froze, for that one moment. Her eyes widened in shock, bright accounting surprise. If he had to accept a moment to bethink forever, it ability be this one. Then, it came. Kurama's chakra came exploding forward, a massive beachcomber that Naruto had to accompany with the antecedent impact. Naruto brought his calmly calm and put aggregate he could into it. Everything, all he had and more, he put in to breach this illusion. To acknowledgement to the complete world, and to alive and breathe and see light. To see her in the beef and prove her amiss and his way was appropriate and far better. She accomplished her folly, the abrupt blooper of concentration, but she was too late. All he could anticipate of was her reaction, what she might have been afore the bribery of the 10 tails. He would accepted that person. If there was any adventitious to accompany for that to happen, afresh this charge end. The apple cracked, shattered. It was like a glass, and he accessed through. He gasped back the air abounding his lungs, conflicting and cold. Her but about his abutting was balmy and tight. She flinched in the complete world, her anchor abandoned about his neck. He addled at her arm, and her fingers came loose. Yet, he already acquainted the crisis of her all-killing ash-bone. He about managed to abstain it, as he acquainted the crisis canyon by the beard of his neck. He jumped abroad a safe ambit and kept a accurate eye. There was a apparent dip in her chakra, as amaranthine as it seemed at first. How abundant chakra did that use? Annihilation abroad mattered, there was abandoned her. It was abandoned a casual thought. The beginning of his apperception was added things about her, and about now. This was activity too well. A fantasy, that all of this was addition illusion. The air was different, far from the one he fabricated his own oral the technique. It was like the one she fabricated for him. Naruto, are you okay? Articulation asked. He didn't alike accept the voice, and the name was about on his lips. Oral his soul, bedfast oral the seal, the fox stared. Kurama, addition articulation that he didn't control. Is this real? Of course, it is. How connected were you in there? Kurama said. Your chakra, it's different, I can tell, he grinned, in advance to Kurama. Although, it was an accepted response. Of advance there would be a advance that aggregate was real. Yeah, and, I've been there for a connected while, can you go on? Is there a choice, he asked. Either way, I don't plan on losing, if that's what you're afraid about. Outside, some ambit abroad from Kaguya. Naruto fell to his knee, but he couldn't relax too much. Getting out of that address took a lot out of him. Though, Kaguya hadn't confused either. The slight movement of her shoulders, and the acceleration and abatement of her chest, it took article out of her too. Naruto sensed several others that approached from behind. He knew that they weren't enemies, and he aloof remembered that were others here. He couldn't put their choir he couldn't alike put to their faces. I noticed your chakra was disrupted, but it looks like you're okay. Can you go on? There's no time to talk, Sasuke said. We charge focus on the enemy, on my lead. Naruto activated Kurama's chakra and he was as accessible as he could any time be. He rose, and he stared at Kaguya who had readied herself too. Let's go, Sasuke said. He didn't absolutely apperceive how connected it lasted. It acquainted so short, anniversary advance deflected or nullified. It acquainted so short, he was acclimated to years of idleness. Aggregate acquainted so insignificant, and he couldn't advice those animosity because it came accustomed like breathing. His acumen of time was skewed, and he still didn't absolutely accept that he was in the complete world. Was this reality? The abandoned affair he knew for certain, Kaguya was real. He anticipation of a solution, and there were so few. Naruto wouldn't fail, affected or otherwise. It was abandoned at the end, back he accomplished which absoluteness that he was in. Her Duke acicular at him, a beam of bone, and he resisted moving. Abandoned back he had the sealing address activated on Kaguya. He acquainted it bore him. It was like a needle, a baby aciculate sting. His senses screamed at him, but he calmed it down. Kaguya didn't apperceive how it acquainted to be hit by her all-killing ash bone. Well, it was complete all along, he muttered. He couldn't advise but laugh. This wasn't a paradise. It shouldn't accept a rise to this. Kaguya's formed into a attending a authentic shock, and she trembled at the furnishings of the ceiling. He admired he knew her thoughts, that he didn't accept to go on by his guesses. He acquainted the tears that fell, and they amused his cheeks as they trickled down. He could at atomic do one aftermost thing. Well, I win, you fool, Kaguya said. Her aperture moved, but he couldn't apprehend her. He can assuredly sleep. He wasn't abiding whether he should proceed. Article kept him here, but addition drew him away. A faculty of warmth, and the adumbration of cold. To move forward, or to breach forever. Perhaps, what acquainted like lifetimes and lifetimes ago, he would accept hated that fact. That he was gone consistently from the active and labored here. Yet, as time never halted, there was change. He died, and he was accept with it. Naruto waited. For what, he didn't absolutely know, but he stood and waited. Like back he was in the broad abyss, there was annihilation here. He was acclimated to it. Of course, he remembered what he had done appropriate afore he died. So there was added affair that kept him here, that he was fatigued too like a moth to flame. Kaguya. She sat, her dress and beard that advance over the arena that didn't exist. An abandoned space. A fool, with a absurd promise, she muttered. The fool who was right, he replied. Does that alike achieve sense? The actuality who asleep him. The actuality he loved. Such a abhorrent one. Was adulation chosen? Or was aloof accustomed as breathing? Well, you lost. Is that correct? She replied. I am immortal, afterwards all. It's so simple, a fool can accept it. You failed, but will you try again? Abort until you succeed, and it didn't assignment out this time. She befuddled her head, why did you arise here? Why shouldn't I? This is not a abode for you. He looked about the black, never catastrophe dark. This doesn't assume a abode for you either. She didn't attending at him, but she was angered. Leave, go. Naruto looked about some more, already the alarm had been inviting, but it no best seemed so. There, above this abode amid activity and death, lay his mother and all those who had died. And, why should I? You are dead, and I am not. Kaguya looked at him then. I will never die, so I can never leave. What a abhorrent curse. To never go beyond, to be actuality for all eternity. If you're bankrupt forever, afresh you're as acceptable as dead. I don't anticipate I'm activity anywhere. Their abandoned aggregation was the dark, an anniversary other, but he was acclimated to this. He sat too, and he beyond his legs and relaxed. The weight fell off his shoulders. Did he accept to die? Or was it article that he had to do to allowance her away? You will leave, she said. Perhaps today, conceivably the next. In here? There is no today, or tomorrow, he replied. Like all those canicule in the darkness. So, I'll be actuality forever. She looked at him but said nothing. Though, he knew there was a question. I like to anticipate that accurate adulation lasts forever, he said. You would be wrong, she said, and for once, weakly. Or maybe that was his wish, and he absurd it. Man, he got fucked up during his time in her technique. I affiance that I'll never leave, he said. I did prove you wrong, didn't I? No, you didn't. Acquisition those from my association isn't accessible anymore. Then I assumption I accept to amend my promise. A abode afterwards you, is not a abode I'd be for long, he replied. Her eyes darted away. Perhaps you're correct, that the barbarian addle me away, she confessed. Yet, I still do not affliction for all those humans. His aperture trembled, and his articulation acquainted coarse. He was errant a lot, these affections acquainted powerful, far bigger than the abhorrence and frustration, and of activity hopeless and alone. Well, you accept time to achieve it up, should we any time get out of here. I accept no admiration to do so. Not them, he said. Make it up to me, for all these abandoned centuries. He didn't appetite to be abandoned anymore. Kaguya stared, about pitiful. You're reminding me of what adulation charge except acquainted once. She said annihilation else, but she bankrupt her eyes and didn't move. For once, he acquainted happy.